Let's study the modern Class 2 procedure from start to finish. In the preoperative x-rays, we see incipient caries on the mesial of the first molar. We're showing various views with different levels of magnification of how the case presents clinically. Proper rubber dam isolation affords us many benefits, one of which is soft tissue compression, so we have access to the infinity edge. You'll see that benefit later. The cavitation occurred buccal to the contact, so I'll keep that in mind when I do initial burr penetration. Now we are applying disclosing solution, which is one of the first things we do in the procedure once the rubber dam is placed. We want to place the disclosing solution on a dry tooth. We'll quickly rinse it off with water, and now we're looking at this infinity edge area that is absolutely covered with biofilm. Placement of the diamond wedge is interesting. It needs to be kind of a slow process as you're gently compressing the papilla. We need to lift the rubber dam away on the other side. If we don't do that, you'll be fighting that rubber dam as it pushes the wedge backwards in the other direction. We want to push the flat end of these pliers against the wedge to continue to push it toward the buccal. You'll notice that the embrasure, the overall embrasure shape here is C-shaped, it's curved. So the benefits of this diamond wedge allow this to have this overall curvature that we would never have with the wooden wedge. It is key to continue to cuff the rubber dam once the diamond wedge is placed, to cuff the rubber dam actually under the diamond wedge to protect it. You see now I'm making initial penetration with the number 5 burr in the Comet Bioclear burr kit. We feel that the diamonds give us better control over cutting compared to carbide. Now what I'm going to be doing is remove the marginal ridge and get into the interproximal caries. We're going to be following caries at the dento-enamel junction. There's a couple of things we're not going to do. We are not going to break the contact with this larger burr. We're going to be doing that later. And we're not going to be worrying about axial caries because in the modern cavity preparation, we are planning to do selective caries retention if need be. So what we're really focusing on here during this initial cutting is to chase the caries at the dento-enamel junction. So as we move buccolingually and apically, we're actually creating a bit of an undercut as we go along, which may or may not be removed later when we do the radius wall through the enamel. I'm looking from the palatal. It looks like we still have caries on the palatal area of the DEJ. We're now going to be rolling the mirror around, looking at the buccal. So we still have caries at the dento-enamel junction. So I'm still going to be doing cutting along the DEJ, moving apically, buccally, and lingually right at the DEJ. Once again, I'm being very careful to stay inside of the cavity prep. That's the thing that we have to keep in mind during this phase. Stay inside the cavity prep. Simply explore caries at the DEJ. This is a defect-specific cavity preparation. It's going to be completely dependent on the caries, unlike previous models where there was an arbitrary cutting of the tooth. This is completely caries and defect-specific. So now I'm going into the palatal. As I evaluate the palatal, it looks like the palatal looks clean at the DEJ. The buccal under the microscope looks a little bit suspect. One of the problems with caries indicator is we sometimes have false negatives. So what we find under the microscope is, if we'll take this Clark Explorer, which I'm going to show you in a minute, we'll take the Clark Explorer and probe soft dentin. We cannot leave soft dentin at the dento-enamel junction. So as I'm applying caries indicator, and you're going to see that you don't see much decay here at the DEJ. But I'm suspicious, so I take the Clark Explorer and probe the DEJ, and sure enough, there is soft infected dentin at the DEJ. That must be removed, and unfortunately, that's being left in a very large number of cavity preparations cut today because number one, people don't use a lot of magnification, and number two, they're not looking in that area. So let's look in that area. Now that I've applied caries indicator to that softened caries that's been probed and disrupted by the Explorer, now it stains. So you can use caries indicator in a case like this after you probe the soft infected dentin at the dento-enamel junction, but you can't use a large instrument like the old-fashioned spoon excavator. So we don't use spoon excavators anymore as far as caries excavation or for testing for soft dentin. We use diamond burrs to cut, and then we also use the very sharp Explorer, like the Clark Explorer, to probe that. Now we're looking at the caries that's been removed at the DEJ. That was burr number 6 from the Comet kit. Now I'm going to be cutting through this undermined enamel to begin to create the radius wall that will form the bulk of the enamel rod exposure during the cavity preparation. So this is a new skill that has to be acquired. So we're going to go ahead and basically section through that enamel to create the radius wall. One of the purposes of this video is to demonstrate how that we can cut this cavity preparation safely with a modern mindset and a modern armamentarium. There is a very high number of teeth that are unfortunately iatrogenically gouged during cavity preparation. And so you can see with these movements and with the proper burrs, and once again with the proper plan, it's fairly routine not to gouge the neighboring tooth. We're going to be leveraging off of the pre-wedge. Pre-wedge is essential for the modern class 2. So we're actually using the diamond wedge as a vertical stop as I am grooming the radius bevel on the gingival portion of the restoration. This protects the rubber dam, the soft tissue, and more importantly, it actually gives us a vertical stop for our craftsmanship, so we can really direct the burr safely. So it's a new sensation compared to, of course, the old way of doing things, but we've tried to combine a safety factor and basic principles of burr movements to afford, number one, a great preparation, but number two, protection of the neighboring tooth and the soft tissue. So I'm still going after a little bit of DEJ caries there that I saw, and I am continuing to create the radius wall. It's no longer radius bevel, it's a radius wall. So you can see the burr movements. We'll do the final burr movements dry because we're not going to be generating much heat. We're in the enamel. So doing the burr movements dry allow me to see a powder trail. So I do not want my dental assistant blowing a lot of air here because I want to follow the powder trail of the diamond burr. Now this is burr number 2 in the Comet kit. We're going to use this for the radius wall on the occlusal. This is key to create a compression-based restoration. Let me repeat. This burr movement and the radius wall on the occlusal is key to create an area so that at the primary strike point, when the opposing cusp hits this tooth, that this area of the composite is in compression. So we've got to create a radius wall that's going to become tangential to the occlusal surface. So you'll see me move that burr accordingly. Now we are removing old composite that is on the occlusal. We're creating a calla lily here by using burr number 5 from the burr kit. So we're removing an old composite here, creating a compression in that area, and now we're ready to remove the pre-wedge. You'll notice that we immediately get some bleeding. So we're going to be able to manage that later with simple compression when the wedge is placed again, but we're going to go ahead and take an interproximal carver to remove any loose enamel rods or any calculus that might be apical to the bevel, because remember, we're going to have an infinity edge margin. So the next thing we're going to do is to take this diamond-coated metal strip to remove any loose enamel rods, any biofilm that's apical to the bevel, because remember, with composite always goes past the bevel. So we have to turn a disadvantage into an advantage. It used to be called flashing. Now it's a good thing. It's the infinity edge. Once I've disrupted that subgingival area, I can go ahead and blast that. We're blasting the inside of the cavity preparation. Look carefully. We're going to be removing biofilm that's outside of the radius wall, because once again, with the infinity edge margin, we've got to clean the entire surface of the tooth essentially to the midline, because with the infinity edge, it may go that far. We're going to go ahead and optimize the shape of the neighboring tooth. The neighboring tooth did not have a good shape, which may have led to caries. So a contact is like a marriage. We have to have two partners working together. So now we've optimized the neighboring tooth. You can see the cavity outline from multiple angles with clean, blasted enamel. We've aggressively removed caries at the dentino-enamel junction. We have all of the biofilm removed. The last thing that I'll be looking for is to inspect the cavity preparation to see if there's anything that I don't like. That could include caries at the DEJ or other problems. Now what you're going to be seeing here in just a moment is what's called a stress riser. There it is. That's a potential stress riser in the composite. So we have to have a gradual transition from thick to thin, from inside of the cavity to outside of the cavity. That little stress riser there is going to be a potential problem. And not only that, it's going to disrupt the flow when we do injection molding. So I'm going to go ahead and try and smooth that little stress riser, but I'm going to have a little bit of trouble. And so instead I'll bring actually the Softlex XT disc coarse into smooth that area, a lot like we did when we did gold onlays and gold inlays with the Dick Tucker style of cavity preparation. So I was able to remove the stress riser there, and now we're ready to insert the biofit matrix. What we're going to do now is we have to press on the tab as hard as we can. Let me emphasize that again. Press as hard as you can. You cannot smash these matrices there. They are the HD version that allows us to take the matrix 2 millimeters apical to the bevel, and that's key to have an infinity edge and key not to have an overhang. Now we're going to bring the wedge in, and because the wedge seemed to keep backing out from the palatal, I'm going to change, and I'm going to go ahead and bring the wedge from the buccal. It is key. You must hold the tab down while you're inserting the wedge. You must hold the tab down while you're inserting the wedge to make sure that the matrix stays fully seated. So once again, I can't emphasize that enough. You must hold the tab very firmly over the marginal ridge of the neighboring tooth while you're pressing the wedge into place. Now we're taking a look at the matrix placement to make sure that we like the position. You'll notice that that sort of almost concave area has been adapted to by the diamond wedge. We're now seating the twin ring separator. We want to seat that a little bit like a rubber dam clamp, and then the next thing you'll see is me rocking the twin ring apically. Now we're inspecting to make sure that we have a great seal. We have a beautiful infinity edge access there. We're showing multiple angles of the entire assembly, and now we're ready to injection mold. This is the go, no go probe, and what we're looking at is to make sure that the cavity preparation is not deeper than 5 millimeters. And so the yellow line is 5 millimeters, so what that's telling me is this is a go. We don't need to do layering here. I'm putting a little bit of liquid etch first because that allows the etch to go around the corner, and then we'll go ahead and put in the gel etchant, phosphoric acid, and we're going to inject that gel etch around the corner out to the infinity edge. And then we'll go ahead and etch the entire portion of the occlusal that will be involved in that part of the class 2. And we're going to etch just past the radius bevel or radius wall on the occlusal, so they have an infinity edge there. I'm going to go ahead and dry after etching for 10 seconds. And then we're going to massage the Scotch-Bond Universal for a full 20 seconds into dentin tubules. This is key. And then before we lacquer, we're going to go ahead and do what's called the spot weld technique, which is mandatory for tight contact. So we're going to air thin. And then we're going to go ahead and bring the bulk fill flowable up and create a couple of spot welds. You'll see that in just a moment. Now I'm evaluating to make sure that all the dentin has been covered with the Scotch-Bond Universal. So once again, we're going to be putting a little 1 millimeter button on the corners of the matrix, right where the matrix goes from horizontal to vertical. That needs to go outside, over, and inside the matrix on each button. This is the push-pull instrument. I'm going to take the matrix and push it over aggressively with two hands to create tension and great compression of the neighboring tooth. And that now that we have all this tension built up on the system and pressure, we'll go ahead and cure those little spot welds. That's going to guarantee a very tight contact and a very broad contact. Once we've cured the little buttons, we're going to go now in and cure the interproximal area that was blocked by the metal instrument. We'll cure that for 10 seconds, and now we're going to go ahead and do injection molding, which is 1, 2, 3. First thing is we're going to use the adhesive again as a surfactant. We will air thin that generous adhesive that's been placed in there, but not Liecure. Then we're going to inject with the bulk fill flowable at 90 degrees to the matrix tooth interface. Watch the flowable go around the corner almost all the way to mid-tooth. We want to inject to the edge of the matrix if we can. Then we're going to redirect the cannula, always injecting at 90 degrees to the matrix tooth interface. The uncured adhesive acts as a wonderful surfactant to get a void-free, complete infinity edge. All of that adhesive will be displaced and replaced by the bulk fill flowable. So once again, we've injected to the infinity edge, and now we're going to finish with phase 3 of injection molding, which is the Filtech 1 bulk fill paste. That's going to displace the flowable for the most part, and we anticipate that this restoration will be about 95% paste, or Filtech 1, as opposed to the bulk fill flowable. The flowable is really acting as a temporary surfactant for the paste. Now what we're going to do is to take this paddle and create a gentle central groove that's going to help us with C factor. That'll help us with depth of cure as we make the restoration a little bit less deep, and it reduces finishing. We're going to cure from the occlusal from 10 seconds, and we shortened that just for expediency, but that was a full 10 seconds on the occlusal. And now we're going to finish 3-point curing by coming in from the mesial buccal. And of course, it's important to use an orange filter to protect your eyes, so we use that for just a minute to demonstrate that. And then we're going to go ahead and cure from the mesial palatal. 10 seconds, 10 seconds, and 10 seconds. Now, if you take a look, there's a quick release feature on the Biofit matrix that allows a quick release of the matrix. You're also going to enjoy the fact that because the mylar is much smoother than a metal matrix, it comes away easily and leaves a much nicer, smoother surface, which will, of course, resist stain, be more resistant to wear, and also be healthier than the surface that's imparted by a metal matrix. Now we're going to go in with burr number 1 from the Comet kit, and we're going to cut or section the composite exactly 1 millimeter from where we want the grade. We don't want to use this burr to do any margination. This is for simply sectioning the excess composite. We don't manipulate the composite anymore. We don't try and marginate it. We want to leave that excess at the marginal area so it shrinks toward the margins. And then we do the cutback. Now, as far as margination, that happens with the SoftFlex XT disc. The one thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure to keep that SoftFlex disc out of the embrasure. That infinity edge area in the embrasure needs to be left alone, which is different than the way that we used to do it when we had more of a GV black or a slot prep. Once again, I'm taking that SoftFlex disc. I'm going to change the position so it's no longer inverted. I'm going to create a mirror image of the neighboring marginal ridge. So it should sort of look like gull wings when you look with your mirror. In other words, each embrasure needs to mirror the other embrasure. It's so critical that the shoulders of each marginal ridge line up perfectly. So I'm looking with my mirror to make sure that those marginal ridges are absolute identical twins or mirror images of each other. That's going to avoid fracturing. It's going to make a much more comfortable restoration. Remember, composite is a brittle material. We have to put it into compression, and we have to remove stress risers, and we have to have nice, soft, rounded contours. And these restorations can last for decades if we understand the strengths and liabilities of composite. Composite is a brittle material. It's a wonderful material, but we have to manage it in a way that's appropriate. Now I'm taking that SoftFlex XT disc and carefully carving the buccal and lingual grooves. We feel that this is the safest way to marginate the composite. So we're not using the SoftFlex XT disc for polishing. We're using it for sculpting. As the disc softens, it becomes safer and safer to roll into those embrasures and grooves. I'll jump back to that burr number 1 from the Comet kit to remove the little vestige or the sort of the leftover connection where it went into the tab. Sometimes we see doctors leave that little vestige, so that vestige has to be gently trimmed away. Now, on the occlusal of a posterior tooth, I love an old-fashioned brownie, and we're going to go in here and create that gentle primary anatomy. We're not going to make any deep secondary and tertiary anatomy that can lead to fracturing. The next thing we're going to do is take that interproximal carver and make sure at the infinity edge area we don't have any little bits of extra flowable or adhesive. You may see that on a radiograph later if you don't take care of that. The contact is amazing. It's broad. It's egg-shaped, like in the old days or when I'm able to do a gold onlay with great, big, beautiful, rounded contours. This is the SoftFlex strip. We're going to bring it through on the coarse side first. And sometimes if you grab it with a hemostat, in this position, it's a little bit easier to actually polish that infinity edge. We take it through the safe zone, and I'll take it through on the smooth side. Some doctors won't do this step because they think it may mar the finish, but I hate to leave any little bits of adhesive there. You may see that on an x-ray if you don't do that. The next thing is the magic mix. We're going to bring the magic mix in these one-use cups, single-use cups. And what you want to do is pick up the magic mix with the cup and then roll it into the embrasures, roll it across your infinity edge. This is a great way of marginating the composite without aggressively removing too much enamel. So it really respects the composite and the enamel, but it does do a great pre-polish and kind of knocks off any little rough areas of flashing or excess adhesive. Now this is the Rockstar Polisher. This is diamond impregnated in multi-use. And so we're going to be using this dry at first because it heats up the composite just a bit and is a good aggressive polisher. Now we go to the classic movement for the Rockstar polish. We're going to flex this cup using heavy pressure, constant air water from the assistant so that we don't overheat the composite, because now I've really tripled the force that I'm using in the wet stage of the Rockstar polisher. I'll flex that into the grooves. I'll follow it over the marginal ridge and into the interproximal. If you'd like, you can take the cone version of the Rockstar polisher and just refine some of that occlusal anatomy just a little bit. The primary anatomy is all we want. Once again, with composite, you cannot put deep grooves in composite and expect it not to fracture later. So I'm showing high magnification of just polishing the primary anatomy with the little point. I think it's a great idea, just to be safe, once we've done all the polishing, to go ahead and repeat the 3-point curing. Once again, 10 seconds on the occlusal, 10 seconds on the mesial buccal, 10 seconds on the distal buccal. We're going to go ahead and check the occlusion, and remember that composite is going to absorb 1% of its volume in moisture, so you have to leave it in slight hypoocclusion. We're going to go ahead and quickly equilibrate the case. We want to make sure, once again, and leave the tooth in slight hypoocclusion, because the composite is going to swell and absorb 1% of its volume in water. And so we really need to make sure that the little blue smudges on the composite are slightly less than the other teeth and slightly less where it's on the native enamel. So I'm carefully removing the excess occlusion there. We can quickly polish it with the Rockstar polisher. Pre-op and a post-operative radiograph, you can see the infinity edge. You can see the sort of different presentation of the Clark Class II radiographically. We're looking at the integration of the composite tooth to the tooth with the infinity edge, and there you have it. The Clark Class II procedure can be summarized with the ICE acronym. The I stands for infinity edge, the C for compression-based, and E, enamel-driven. The asterisk represents the assumption that selective caries retention is the default position for axial caries retention in moderate to deep lesions.